Hello and welcome to another one of Forward Camera tutorials. I ask that anyone who watches our videos, please feel free to subscribe. It really supports what we do and it helps us create new videos and really help the film community overall. So today I have the privilege of talking about this amazing Olympus OM-1, one of my personal favorite SLR film cameras from the 70s. It's unlike a lot of the other ones at the time. This one is very compact. It's very lightweight. Unlike my Nikon, this one is just like a feather. So I want to talk about some of the interesting things about this camera that I love and that makes it unique, and that also that make you fall in love with it, hopefully. So let's get started. So the first thing is it takes the Olympus Zuiko lens, right? There are many different it's the OM system lens, right? There are many of these out there. They're not super expensive, and there are many different types, making an adaptable camera. The other thing that's interesting about this camera is that if we take a look at the lens, and I find this really cool. If we take a look at the lens, the aperture is at the outside part of the lens here. So when you switch the aperture, you can switch it over here. And the shutter, unlike many cameras, right? Usually the shutter speed is located over here. The shutter speed is actually a ring around the lens. And for some people, this might be kind of strange because they're used to, switching the aperture here and switching the shutter speed here. But if you're doing something really fast, you're taking photos quickly, everything on the lens, I find it's like, it makes it much more interesting to take photos this way. I just think it's a lot more convenient to be able to switch them back and forth on the lens. So that's a bit of a preference thing I like about this. This camera can go as fast as 1/1000th of a second. So if I could show you what it sounds like, right? Really fast. All the way down to 1 second. You can switch it and you can hear it's 1 second. And bulb mode, which is basically like set your camera up on a tripod and take a very long exposure with an external shutter cable. You would pop the cable in here, right? You would cock the shutter, pop the cable in here, and then there's a little button on the cable that pushes this down, and you can hold it for however long you want to expose, like streaks at night, for instance, or like cars going across a highway, something like that, or stars. So I want to talk about how to use the camera. So the first thing is, detaching a lens. So how do we do that? Many cameras would have a little button here or some sort of lever or like a thing to press down here, but that's not how it works for the Olympus OM. There's, on the lens itself, there's these two extrusions here, right, that you have to push down these two buttons at the same time, and you turn it counterclockwise and it pops right off. And you notice inside, like every other SLR, there's the mirror, right? We want to keep that nice and clean. So to pop it back on, I see there's a red here, a little red dot, and you align it with the little red dot here. See how it goes in nicely? And you do it, and you move it to the right until it clicks, and it clicks, right? Now I'm ready to take a photo. So first things first, the camera doesn't require a battery to function, but it does require a battery to use the internal light meter because it's a mechanical camera. Okay, so that means that if your battery dies, you could still take photos, which is a really nice part of this camera, unlike electronic shutters, right? The other thing that I want to talk about too is you need a battery, right? So you're going to pop the batteries by opening up this little battery area here. You pop the batteries inside, and when you're done popping the batteries, you could turn the camera light meter on and off over here. So if you're not using it, keep it off so you don't drain the battery. You're going to set your shutter speed, not your shutter speed, your ASA, the film speed, on this dial here. So you're going to move this over, right? Move this over a little bit. There's a little button here. And if you push down, you can move, right? The dial moves and it clicks, right, with this little arrow here until it aligns with the number on your film. So usually Kodak Tri-X, the black and white film, is 400, so I keep it at 400. but a lot of people might want to do, you know, a different film speed. So you would select it accordingly over there. So your meter gets the proper reading. And then in order to put the film in, you would take this over here, you would pop it open, right? You lift it and it unlocks. You take your 35mm black and white or color film, you pop the side of the film in here, like the cartridge, and upside down, you push this down till it locks, right? These little hooks in here would go inside the film. You move the film across nice and flush, and then you move the end of the film into one of these little holes here. And once it's in there, you gotta make it flush. So you're gonna move this, right over and advance the film one over until it's nice and flush. And when it is, you lock the door and you'll hear it click and you're good to go. So that restarts the number. So right now we're at S. That means start. So we wanna, right, keep going until we hit the number 1. And once we're on 1, that means it's going to be the first frame that we're going to be able to take a picture that we know will be properly exposed. It's not going to be, you know, exposed to light beforehand, right? It only depends on our camera now. So how do we take a proper exposure? We turn our light meter on. We look inside the camera, and there's going to be a needle in the camera, and the needle will go up and down. And you will adjust, you want to keep the needle in the middle. You will adjust either the aperture first, and then whatever aperture, select the aperture you want depending on the depth of field, so how blurry you want in the background, right? Or to shut out the light. For instance, 16 is the smallest on this one, and this lens, and 1.4 is the biggest aperture. And then you would select the proper shutter speed, right? Depending upon your exposure, right? So you would move that arrow nice in the middle, right? If it's too up, it's too overexposed. If it goes down inside the viewfinder, that means it's underexposed. You want it to be in the middle. And the other way around too. So if you're trying to take photo of something really fast, like a bird or a race car, maybe you want to select 1/1000th or 1/5000th of a second, and then change the aperture, right? So that the exposure works, you know, accordingly, right? You want to switch the shutter speed first and then the aperture that way. So it depends on your need. And to take a photo, you would press the shutter button, right? So you can hear it right now. So that's how you take photos. The other thing that's cool about this camera, and I'm going to open the lens again to show you, is that maybe you're taking very long exposures and you don't want light to bounce up, and for a long period of time, the light from the mirror might affect the film in the back while you're taking the exposures. So you can flip the mirror. There's a little mirror flip thing here. You can flip the mirror over here. Oh, okay, see, you notice that it stays up to protect the film from getting overexposed by the mirror's like light. So you can do that in those cases, but you want to flip it down most of the time. Don't leave it up in the middle, right? You can jam it. And now, like, you're all done. Oh, sorry, one more thing actually I forgot to talk about is that what happens if you want to take photos on a tripod. So there's also a little screw here for the tripod. And if you want to take photos of a big group of people, so there's this little lever here that you would push down, right, to set the timer. You would cock the shutter. You don't press the shutter button yet. You would first take your finger and move this little teeny thing over here. You would move this up. And what does that do? Well, that will set the timer to start, right? And you would go into the photo after you focus this. You have to focus the camera first, whatever it is, the group that you're going to be in, for instance, right? And set all of the aperture and the shutter speed ahead of time. You know, you got to make sure that it's exposed properly. And then you would press this button, this little lever here I'm at, right, with your finger. There you go. And you would wait until the shutter goes off. Hear it? that means that it took the photo, right? So it's an automatic timer. Again, big fingers, a little bit sometimes. It takes a little time to move the different levers and stuff, but guess I'm getting used to, right? And now we're done, right? Maybe we're done with our 24 photos or 36 photos. It will tell us over here, right? In the little area over here with the numbers, right? And when we're done, what we want to do is we want to take the film out. So how do we do that? So unlike a lot of other cameras from this time who have a little button on, which have a little button on the bottom, this has a little switch here that you have to go from up to R. When you're taking photos, it's up. So don't mess that up, right? Because you can have a problem with that. And when you're done, you press it down to R, right? And you're gonna push it back when you're done. And then you move this over here, you move this up, and then you crank until all the film goes back on the spool, and it will click. And then you move this back up to not forget, and then you would open up the camera again over here, and then take the film out, and you're done. You're ready to shoot another roll. So that's pretty much all there is to this camera, but I have to say that I'm deeply impressed with this one. It's one of my favorites, just based on the weight and just how it's different and so unique. Even though there were some Nikons at that time period that did have the shutter speed on the lens, which makes it really cool. They were much heavier, and this one is just not gonna hurt your neck that much when you're carrying it around. It's lightweight and it's much smaller compared to a lot of the other cameras, which I think I really like about it. The one other thing though I didn't mention was the flash. So you would pop the flash and the hot shoe up here, right, and it connects to the camera, and you're ready to shoot your photos, right? I think for this one you have to switch this to 1/60th of a second or below for flash, but I think it's 1/60th of a second for this one. And that's all there is to the Olympus OM-1, but it is quite the camera, and I highly recommend it. It comes in our shop every so often, so be on the lookout. Please check out, right? Please subscribe to our channel. It really supports everything that we do, and it allows us to post new videos. We also have a Forward Cameras Instagram account at Forward Cameras, Twitter account at Forward Cameras, and our shop forwardcameras.com, where we sell cameras, but we also sell other vintage items. So subscribe, and see you next time. Bye-bye.